I was driving home, utterly thrilled after leaving the lawyer's office, ready to tell my son that my brother, who had no children, had left me his entire estate and a bank account with a massive balance. But as I pulled up to the house, I heard the voices of my son, Robert, and my daughter-in-law, Chelsea, coming from the open window. And I was horrified. Completely horrified. Because what drifted out of that window were not words of love or affection or anything from the family I thought we had. They were daggers. They were pure poison distilled in every syllable. And I stood there, frozen in my own yard, the lawyer's documents trembling in my hands, while my entire world fell apart in a matter of seconds. Let me back up just a few minutes, because you need to understand the cruel irony of this moment. You need to understand that I was floating, literally floating on a cloud of happiness I hadn't felt in decades. I had just left the lawyer's office at 4:30 in the afternoon, and the sun was still shining with that golden October light that makes everything look like a movie. The attorney, a serious man with thick glasses and a monotonous voice, had told me the words I never imagined hearing. "Mrs. Carter, your brother William has left you everything in his will. The 200-acre ranch, the main house, the tillable land, and a bank account with a balance of $850,000. $850,000. At 68 years old. After a lifetime of breaking my back, sacrificing everything, living paycheck to paycheck. Suddenly, out of nowhere, salvation, financial freedom, the end of worries. I signed the papers with shaky hands, tucked everything into a manila folder that I pressed against my chest like it was the most valuable treasure in the universe. And I walked out of there feeling that, for the first time in my life, God was smiling down on me. For the first time, after so many losses, so many tears, so much pain, something good was happening to me. Something huge. Something that would change everything. I drove the 20 minutes to my house with a stupid smile plastered on my face. I couldn't stop imagining the scene. I would arrive, open the door, find Robert and Chelsea in the living room, and I'd say with feigned calm, "I have something to tell you." I imagined their curious faces, then the revelation, the shouts of joy, the hugs, the tears of happiness. My son lifting me off the floor like when he was young. Chelsea crying with emotion. That daughter I always treated as my own. The three of us embracing, planning the future, dreaming together. Finally, after 3 years of them living with me in my small house because they were in financial trouble, I could truly help them. Buy them a house of their own. Fund Robert's photography business. Give Chelsea that trip she always mentioned. Be the matriarch who rescues her family. The smell of lilac wafted through the car window, mixing with the scent of wet earth from the last rain. Everything felt perfect, blessed, as if the universe were finally making up for decades of suffering. Because I had suffered. God knows I had suffered. I was widowed at 30 years old, with a 4-year-old child in my arms. My husband died in a stupid accident, crushed by a truck that ran a stop sign. Overnight, I was alone, with no income, no plan, with a child who looked at me with those huge eyes, not understanding why Dad wasn't coming home. And you know what I did? I didn't fall apart. I didn't afford myself the luxury of falling apart. I worked 3 jobs simultaneously for years. I cleaned houses at 5 in the morning, worked in a store from 8 to 4, and sewed clothes at night until my eyes closed from exhaustion. I slept 4 hours, if I was lucky. My hands were destroyed, rough as sandpaper, scarred from needles and cleaning chemicals. But Robert never went hungry, never lacked for anything. I gave him an education, college, opportunities. I sold my mother's jewelry, the only pieces I owned, to pay for his degree. I never remarried, even though I had suitors, because all my energy, all my love, all my time, I gave to him, only to him. When he met Chelsea 10 years ago, I thought my sacrifice had finally been worth it. She was an educated, sweet girl who seemed to genuinely love him. She treated me well, called me on the phone, included me in their plans. When they got married 7 years ago, I cried with happiness at that wedding, which I personally funded by draining 3 years of savings. I thought, finally, my son has a partner. Finally, he won't be alone when I'm gone. I helped them with the down payment on their first apartment. I bought them furniture. I paid for their honeymoon trip, all with a smile, because for me, there was no greater joy than seeing them happy. 3 years ago, when they knocked on my door with suitcases and defeated looks because they had lost their jobs and couldn't pay the rent, I opened my home without a second thought. Stay as long as you need, I told them. My house was small, modest, with roof leaks and pipes that made strange noises, but it was theirs. I never charged them a cent, never asked them to contribute to expenses. On the contrary, I kept helping them with the little I had from my meager pension. I cooked for them, washed their clothes, tried to make their lives easier. Because that was me, a mother who sacrifices until her last breath. And now, with this massive inheritance, I could finally do everything I had always dreamed of for them. Fix the house, buy them a new car, fund Robert's dreams, give Chelsea the comfortable life she deserved. My happiness was completely intertwined with theirs. That's what I thought as I parked my old car in front of the house. That's what I believed as I got out with my purse and that manila folder pressed against my chest. But then something changed. A strange silence enveloped me when I stepped onto the lawn. A feeling in my stomach, like a primal warning, something my body knew before my mind did. The front door was ajar as always, the living room window open. And from there, from that front window, voices were coming. The voices of my son and my daughter-in-law. They were speaking in a tone I had never heard from them, conspiratorial, urgent, cruel. I stopped 10 feet from the door. I don't know why. Something told me not to go inside yet, to listen first. And then the words reached my ears with brutal clarity, as if the universe wanted to make sure I didn't miss a single syllable. I can't take it anymore, Robert. I can't keep pretending I care about that old woman. It was Chelsea's voice, my sweet daughter-in-law. But it sounded different, full of contempt, full of hatred. Every day that passes, she's more unbearable. Her constant complaining, her mothball smell, the way she chews her food, it makes me want to throw up. My heart stopped. I literally felt it seize in my chest. And the voice of my son, my Robert, the boy I carried in my womb, whom I nursed, whom I raised alone with blood and tears, responded with a dry laugh I had never heard from him. I know, babe. Believe me, I know. But we have to put up with it a little longer. It's our house, technically. She won't live forever. The words came out of his mouth so naturally, so coldly, that I felt the ground opening beneath my feet. My legs began to tremble. The manila folder slipped a little in my sweaty fingers, but I couldn't move. I was nailed there, like a tree with roots piercing the concrete, forced to listen to my own destruction. A little longer? Chelsea's voice rose in pitch, full of frustration. Robert, it's already been 3 years. 3 years of my life wasted. Living with that woman who thinks she's a saint because she gave us a roof. Like we were begging for charity. This house should be ours, completely ours. Without her invading every space, without having to fake affection every single morning. I'm sick of her repetitive stories about how much she suffered, how much she sacrificed. We know, we get it. But that doesn't make us her slaves forever. Every word was a direct punch to the gut. I felt nauseous. I felt the air grow thick, unbreathable. The scent of lilac that had seemed beautiful moments ago was now choking me. An invader? In my own house? The house I bought with the sweat of 3 simultaneous jobs? The house where I welcomed them with open arms when they had nowhere to go? "You're right," Robert said, and his agreement was worse than any direct insult. "But think about the practical side. If we kick her out now, we'll look like the villains to the whole family, to the neighbors. You know how people talk. Besides, the deed to the house is in her name. We can't do anything legally. But if we wait, if we're patient, when she's gone, everything will automatically be ours. I'm an only child. There's no one else. What if it takes her years to die?" Chelsea's questions sounded as if they were discussing how long a package would take to arrive, not my life, my very existence. "Your mom is like a cockroach, old but resilient. She could live to 90. I'm not wasting another 20 years of my life waiting." 20 years. They were talking about my death as if it were pending paperwork, as if I were an obstacle between them and their happiness. The manila folder was trembling violently in my hands now. Inside were the documents certifying $850,000. An entire ranch, a bright future, and I had rushed home to share it with them. With these 2 people who at this very moment were planning how to get rid of me. "There are options," Robert said quietly, almost a whisper. But the silence of the afternoon carried his words directly to my ears as if he were shouting them at me. "Assisted living isn't that expensive. I've been researching. There's a decent one on the outskirts, like $800 a month. We could tell her it's for her own good, that she can't take care of herself alone anymore, that we're worried she'll fall and break something being here all day by herself. But she's not alone all day. We're here." Chelsea's voice sounded confused. "That's why we'd have to get jobs first, right? To have the perfect excuse. Mom, we can't take care of you anymore because we work all day. It's for your safety." The way he imitated a worried, caring voice made me feel such profound disgust that I had to cover my mouth with my hand to keep from throwing up right there in the yard. "You're a genius." Chelsea laughed, and her laughter sounded genuinely amused, as if my son had just told the best joke in the world. $800 a month is nothing compared to having our privacy back. We could remodel her room, turn it into an office for you or a dressing room for me. Lord knows I need it. And finally, we could have the house the way we want it. Without her hideous ceramic decorations everywhere. Without her crocheted doilies on every piece of furniture. The doilies I crocheted by hand for years. During those endless nights after sewing clothes for others. Because I wanted my house to look nice despite being poor. The ceramic decorations I bought one by one at flea markets on my days off because they were the only things I could afford to decorate with. Everything I had built with so much love, reduced to trash in their eyes. "And what about her pension?" Chelsea asked. And there it was, the real interest. It had always been the money. If we put her in assisted living, could we keep part of her pension? I mean, we'd be paying for the place. Technically, we'd be taking care of her. Her pension is a pittance, like $400 a month. It would barely cover the assisted living. Robert sounded disappointed, as if he were doing mental math and the numbers weren't adding up. But once she's there, we could sell some of her furniture, her things. That antique dresser in her room must be worth something. And she has some jewelry saved up, I think. I don't have jewelry. I sold all of it decades ago to pay for his damn college. But they didn't even know that. I never told them the details of my sacrifices because I didn't want them to feel indebted to me. How stupid I was. How incredibly stupid. The problem is convincing her, Chelsea said. And I could picture her biting her lower lip the way she did when she was thinking. She's stubborn. She'll say she's perfectly fine, that she can take care of herself. She'll cry, make us feel guilty with her sacrifice stories. That's why we have to be strategic. Robert's voice took on a calculated tone that chilled my blood. We start slowly. We point out her forgetfulness, her little confusions. Mom, you already told me that story 3 times today. Are you okay? Mom, you left the stove on again. It's dangerous. Even if it's not true. We make her doubt herself. And when she's insecure enough, we present the assisted living as the only logical option. Gaslighting. My own son was planning to gaslight me to convince me I was losing my mind. To manipulate me psychologically until I broke. Tears began to stream down my cheeks. Hot, bitter, silent. But I didn't make a sound. I couldn't make a sound. I had to hear everything. I had to know exactly what these 2 people, whom I loved with all my being, had become. What if she resists anyway? Chelsea's question floated in the air. There was silence. A long, heavy silence that lasted maybe 5 seconds, but felt like an eternity. And then Robert spoke, and his words were the final blow. Then we wait. Nature takes its course. And let's be honest, if she got seriously ill, it's not like we're going to spend a fortune on treatments either. She's already lived her life. She's had her years. You're right. Chelsea sighed as if they had just solved a complicated math problem. Either way, in a few years this resolves itself. And in the meantime, we keep smiling and putting up with it. My knees nearly buckled. I had to lean against the porch column to keep from falling to the ground. The world spun around me in a nauseating spiral of betrayal and pain. These 2 people, my son and my daughter-in-law, were discussing my death as one discusses the dinner menu, with that same coldness, with that same indifference. And the worst, the absolute worst of it, was that I had literally come skipping with joy to share a fortune with them that would change all our lives. A fortune I planned to use mainly to help them, to give them everything they hadn't been able to have. The irony was so cruel it almost made me laugh. Almost. If it weren't for the fact that I felt my heart being ripped out with bare hands, I would have found some twisted humor in the situation. Here I was, with $850,000 in certified documents inside my bag, listening to them plan how to put me in a cheap assisted living home and keep my meager $400 pension. If they only knew. If they only knew what I was holding. But they weren't going to know. Not yet. Because something inside me, something primitive and fierce that I didn't know I possessed, had just awakened. Well, enough talk about your mother, Chelsea said in a lighter tone, as if they had just finished discussing the weather. What do you want for dinner? Because I'm not cooking. She can do it when she gets home. That's what she's good for, right? At least she can earn her keep. They laughed. Both of them laughed. And that sound, those shared laughs at the expense of my humiliation, finished breaking something fundamental inside me. For 68 years I had been Carmina the good, Carmina the sacrificial one, Carmina the forgiver, the understanding one, the one who always put others first, the one who worked until her body was destroyed so her son could have a future, the one who never asked for anything in return because a mother's love is supposed to be unconditional, selfless, eternal. But at that moment, standing in my own yard, listening to the two people I loved most in the world plan to discard me like garbage, something changed. A chemical, molecular, spiritual transformation. The sweet, understanding Carmina died right there, and in her place, someone new was born. Someone cold. Someone calculating. Someone who had just learned that limitless kindness is just another form of stupidity. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with that air that now tasted like ashes. I adjusted the manila folder under my arm. I checked my reflection in the car window. Red eyes, yes, but nothing a little cold water couldn't disguise. I needed to enter that house as if I had heard nothing. I needed to act. And for the first time in my life, acting didn't mean being authentic and honest, but being the best liar in the world. I walked towards the door with measured, controlled steps. I put the key in the lock with hands that no longer trembled with emotion, but with an icy fury that ran through my veins like mercury. I opened the door and closed it with the usual sound, neither too loud nor too soft. "I'm home," I called out with the most cheerful voice I could manufacture, that voice of the loving mother I had perfected for decades. I heard them move in the living room. Hurried steps, murmurs. When I entered the shared space, there they were. Robert on the ivory sofa that I bought 10 years ago. Chelsea in the armchair, both with their phones in their hands, the perfect image of domestic innocence. They greeted me with smiles, wide, warm, completely fake smiles. And I, who now knew the truth, could see the lie behind every forced facial muscle. "Mom, how was it?" Robert got up and walked towards me with open arms. My son. My baby. The child I nursed, whom I cured when he had chickenpox, whom I taught to ride a bicycle, whom I comforted when his first love rejected him. That very boy was now a stranger with my son's face, approaching to give me a hug I knew he didn't mean. I hugged him. God, how hard it was to hug him. To feel his arms around me, his familiar smell of that cheap cologne he used, and to know that minutes before he was planning how to get rid of me. But I did it. I endured. Because I needed them to believe that everything was normal. "Fine, son. Everything's fine." My voice came out surprisingly steady. Years of hiding pain had trained me for this, without my knowing it. "And you too? How was your day?" "Quiet." Chelsea got up too. She approached and gave me a kiss on the cheek. Her perfume, the one I gave her for her last birthday because she mentioned she liked it, hit me like a punch. We were looking at some things online, planning some ideas for Robert's business, planning how to lock me up in assisted living. That's what they were planning. But I smiled. "That's great, sweetie. I'm glad you're being productive." The word sweetie almost choked me. I had called this woman my daughter for 7 years. I treated her better than many mothers treat their own biological daughters, and she called me a cockroach when she thought I couldn't hear her. "Do you want me to make you some tea, Mom? You look tired." Robert looked at me with that expression of concern that I now knew was pure theater. He was probably already practicing for when he started his plan to make me think I was losing my mind. "No, thank you, honey. I'm fine." I sat down in my favorite chair, that wooden rocking chair that I rescued from a flea market and restored myself. I put my purse aside, making sure the manila folder wasn't visible. They didn't ask what was inside. They didn't ask why I had gone to the lawyers. They didn't even remember that today was my appointment. Of course not. I was just the old furniture in the living room, present but invisible. "Mom?" Chelsea began with that sweet voice that I now recognized as completely manufactured. I was thinking tomorrow we could go to the market together. You know, spend some quality time. It's been a while since it was just the two of us. Quality time. With the woman who half an hour ago said my mothball smell made her want to vomit. I would love that, Chelsea. That would be very nice. The words came out of my mouth as if someone else were saying them, as if I were an actress following a script. I watched them for the next hour. I really watched them, as if I were seeing them for the first time. Robert was 39 years old, but he had never fully matured. He still had that adolescent attitude of expecting things to fall from the sky. His photography business, which he constantly talked about, was more of a fantasy than a reality. He had taken maybe 20 jobs in 3 years, but I always encouraged him, always told him it was just a matter of time, of effort. Now I realized I had spoiled him. I gave him so much, I forgave him so much, that he never learned the real value of things or respect for the person who gave them to him. And Chelsea, 36 years old, conventionally pretty, with that long brown hair that she religiously cared for and those always perfect nails despite not working. How did I not see the superficiality before? How did I not notice that every conversation we had ended up revolving around material things, what she didn't have, what she wanted? When she lost her job 3 years ago, I comforted her. Don't worry, sweetie. Something better will come along. But nothing ever did because she never looked for anything. She settled into my house, my food, my hospitality, and began to see me not as a blessing, but as an obstacle. We ate dinner together that night. I cooked, as always. I made chicken and tomato sauce with rice, one of Robert's favorite dishes. I set the table. I served. I watched them eat what I prepared with my hands while they talked about a series they were watching, about a friend who posted vacation photos, about absolute trivialities. They didn't ask about my day. They didn't ask what I had done. I was the service staff, not part of the family. After dinner, I washed the dishes while they settled back into the living room. I heard their laughter, the sound of the television, that domestic normality that now seemed obscene to me. My hands moved automatically, scrubbing each plate, each glass, while my brain processed everything I had heard. $850,000 waited in a bank account with my name on it. A complete ranch that I could sell or manage. And they didn't have the slightest idea. I dried my hands with the kitchen towel and stood looking out the window at the backyard. Night had completely fallen, and I could only see the dark silhouettes of the trees swaying in the breeze. I remembered all the times I worked in that yard, planting flowers, pulling weeds, trying to create a beautiful space despite our financial situation. I remembered the mornings when I watered the plants before going to clean other people's houses, thinking that at least my family would have a cozy home to return to. How naive. How stupidly naive. My mind began to work in a new way, calculating, cold. If they could plan, so could I. If they could fake love while conspiring behind my back, I could fake ignorance while building my own strategy. But first, I needed to confirm something. I needed to make sure that what I heard wasn't an isolated conversation, a moment of frustration that didn't reflect their true feelings. Although deep down, I knew the truth. No one talks with that level of detail, with that specific coldness, if it's just a momentary outburst. That night I went to bed early, as always. I'm tired, kids. I'll leave you to your show. I said goodbye with kisses on both their foreheads, and they barely looked up from the screen. I went up the stairs to my bedroom, that small room on the second floor that had been mine since we bought this house 20 years ago. I sat on the edge of my bed and took the manila folder out of my purse. Everything was there. The deed to the ranch in my name, the bank papers certifying the account balance, the will letter from my brother William, written in his own hand 2 months before he died, explaining why he left me everything. Because you were the only one who was always there when I needed you, even though I never asked you for anything. Because I admire you more than anyone in this world. Because you deserve something good after so much suffering. Tears began to fall onto the paper, staining the ink. My brother, that quiet, solitary man, knew me better than my own son did. I put the documents in the back of my closet, under a pile of old sweaters that they never checked because they didn't even care enough to snoop in my things. I lay down in the darkness with my eyes open, looking at the ceiling. And for the first time in decades, I allowed resentment to flow freely through my veins. I didn't repress it. I didn't rationalize it. I didn't look for excuses to justify their behavior. I just felt it, pure and burning. I remembered the day Robert was born, 39 years ago. It was a difficult birth, 23 hours of labor. When they finally placed him in my arms, tear-stained and wrinkled, I swore I would do everything for him. Everything. And I kept that promise to the point of losing myself in the process. I never went back to school, although I had dreamed of being a teacher. I never pursued my own dreams because all my energy went into funding his. I never gave myself permission to be selfish, not even for a moment. And for what? To raise a man who planned to lock me up in a cheap assisted living home and keep my $400 pension. A man who had calculated how much my antique dresser would be worth. A man who literally said he wouldn't spend money on treatments if I got seriously ill, because I had already lived my life. The rage I felt at that moment was unlike anything I had ever experienced before. It wasn't hot or explosive. It was cold, dense, heavy as lead. It settled in my chest and stayed there, slowly transforming into something more useful: determination. If they could be cruel, I could be relentless. If they could plan my end, I could plan theirs. Not their death, of course. I wasn't like them. But their awakening, their moment of truth, their downfall. The next 3 days were an exercise in acting that deserved an award. I got up every morning and played my role as the loving mother with surgical precision. I made breakfast, I cleaned the house, I washed their clothes. I smiled when they spoke to me. I nodded when they told me their insignificant plans. And all the time, behind my eyes, there was a machine calculating, measuring, planning. I observed them like a scientist observes specimens in a lab. I noticed how Chelsea spoke to me with that exaggerated sweetness that people use when trying to manipulate someone they consider foolish. I noticed how Robert asked me about my health with a new insistence, probably already starting his strategy of making me doubt myself. "Did you sleep well, Mom? I heard you get up to go to the bathroom 3 times last night. Are you sure you're okay?" I never got up 3 times. He was lying, sowing seeds of confusion. On the 4th day, I made a decision. I couldn't continue like this indefinitely, living this charade, pretending I didn't know what I knew. I needed to confirm the extent of their betrayal, and I needed to do it in a way that gave me absolute advantage. So I did something I had never done in my life. I acted cunningly. That afternoon, I announced I was going to visit my friend Teresa, who lived on the other side of town. "I'll probably be back late. Don't wait up for me." This was unusual. I almost never went out at night. I saw them look at each other, how their eyes lit up with that barely concealed joy of having the house to themselves. I left with my purse and drove to the corner. I parked the car on the parallel street, where they couldn't see it from the house, and walked back stealthily. I entered through the back garden door, the one we never used and that I knew they wouldn't lock. I stayed in the kitchen, in the shadows, completely still, barely breathing. I didn't have to wait long. 15 minutes later, they started talking. This time without whispers, without caution, with the confidence of those who believe they are completely alone. "Thank God she's gone," Chelsea said with a dramatic sigh. "I couldn't stand another minute of pretending. My face hurts from smiling so much." "I know, babe, but you're doing great." Robert's voice sounded proud. "In a few more weeks, we'll start phase 2 of the plan. I've already researched 3 assisted living homes. The cheapest one is on the outskirts, like I told you. $750 a month. With her pension, it almost covers it." "And when will we tell her?" Chelsea sounded anxious, like a child waiting to open Christmas presents. "Soon. But first, I need her to sign some papers. There's a lawyer a friend recommended to me. He says I can get her to sign a power of attorney by claiming it's to make things easier for her so I can handle paperwork because it's complicated at her age. Once I have that power, I can sell the house without her realizing it until it's too late. Sell my house. The house I bought with years of work. The house whose deed was in my name. They were planning to legally scam me, take the only thing I had, and leave me in an assisted living home with the bare minimum. The level of their betrayal had no bottom. "You're brilliant." Chelsea laughed. "And she'll sign just like that? She trusts me blindly. She would never question anything I asked her. She spent her whole life being the sacrificial martyr. She's too good for her own good. Too stupid. Stupid." My son called me stupid. That word echoed in my head like a church bell. Stupid. All those sleepless nights working to pay for his college. Stupid. All those times I skipped meals so he could eat well. Stupid. All those years sacrificing every personal desire, every dream, every opportunity for my own happiness. Stupid. Kindness interpreted as weakness. Unconditional love interpreted as naivety. I wasn't stupid. I was a mother who loved too much someone who never deserved it. "And what if she refuses to sign?" Chelsea asked. And I could hear the sound of her moving on the sofa, probably snuggling up against my son as she always did. "She won't refuse, but if she does, there's plan B. The lawyer also explained that I can claim senile dementia, get a couple of witnesses to say she's losing her memory, that she can't make decisions for herself. With that, I can apply for legal guardianship. It's more complicated and takes longer, but it works." Every word that came out of his mouth was a revelation of how far he was willing to go. My son was willing to destroy my reputation, to make me out to be a demented old woman in front of authorities and acquaintances, just to steal what was mine. And wouldn't it be easier if she just died? Chelsea's question came out as naturally as asking if it wouldn't be easier to order food instead of cooking. She wasn't actually suggesting it, I know. But the fact that she could pronounce those words with that casualness showed me the abyss of her indifference to my life. There was a silence that lasted too long. And then Robert spoke, and although his words were different from what Chelsea implied, the tone was just as chilling. "Don't even joke about that. But honestly, sometimes I think it would be a relief for everyone. She's old now. She's completed her cycle, and we're in the best time of our lives, trapped taking care of someone who only drags us down. Drags us down. I, who gave them a free roof over their heads. I, who cooked for them. I, who paid the utility bills without asking for a cent of contribution. I was dragging them down. The distortion of reality was so grotesque it almost made me laugh. Almost. You're right. Sorry. Chelsea sighed. It's just that I'm so tired of all this. I want our life back. I want to be able to walk around the house naked if I feel like it without worrying about the old woman showing up. I want to decorate the way I want, invite friends over without having to warn them that a bitter old woman lives here. I want privacy, freedom, space. Soon, babe. I promise you, soon. I heard the sound of a kiss. They were kissing while talking about discarding me, and that mental image was so repulsive that I had to swallow the bile rising in my throat. When are you going to ask her to sign the power of attorney? Chelsea asked after a moment. This week. I already have the documents. The lawyer prepared them with complicated technical language so she won't really understand what she's signing. I'm going to tell her it's to facilitate her bank transactions. That way I can help her better with her finances. She knows nothing about laws. She'll sign without reading. The confidence in his voice was overwhelming. He truly believed he knew me. He truly believed he could manipulate me so easily. What he didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that I had been married to a lawyer before he died. My late husband, Robert's father, taught me a lot about laws and contracts during our years together. He taught me to read the fine print, never to sign anything without fully understanding it, to protect myself legally. Ironic that the father's lessons would protect me from the son. "You're so smart," Chelsea cooed, and the tone of admiration in her voice for someone who planned to defraud his own mother made me nauseous. "And after selling the house, what will we do with the money?" "First, we pay all our debts. We owe like $20,000 on credit cards." $20,000. I had no idea they had those debts. They never asked me for help. "Then we'll buy a small apartment for ourselves, something modern in a good area. With what's left, we can travel, buy a decent car, finally live well." "And your mother in the $750 a month assisted living home?" The question had a hint of guilt, barely perceptible. "She'll be fine. She'll have a roof over her head, food, basic care. It's more than many people have at her age." The way he justified the abandonment, as if he were doing me a favor, as if locking me up in the cheapest option while they lived off my house money, was an act of generosity, made me understand something fundamental. My son was not just selfish or immature. He was cruel. There was an inherent cruelty in his character that I never wanted to see because a mother's love blinded me. "I guess you're right," Chelsea said, though she didn't sound completely convinced. "I just hope she doesn't make a scene when we tell her." "She won't. I know her. She'll cry, yes. She'll say we're abandoning her, that after everything she did for me. She'll put on her victim act, but in the end, she'll accept it because she has no other choice. She doesn't have her own money. She has nowhere to go. She has no real friends who can help her. She is completely alone in the world, except for us." The way he analyzed my loneliness, my vulnerability, as if they were tools to be used against me, showed me a level of sociopathy that I didn't know existed in him. But he was wrong. He was wrong about everything. I had $850,000. I had a ranch. I had options he couldn't even imagine. And most importantly, I now had something I had never had before: absolute clarity about who my son really was. I moved away from the kitchen as silently as I had arrived. I slipped out the back door and walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and just stayed there in the darkness, processing everything. I didn't cry. I had no tears left for them. Instead, I felt something more powerful: resolution. I drove aimlessly for an hour, organizing my thoughts. I needed a perfect plan. I couldn't just confront them yet. I needed timing. I needed to maximize the impact. I needed to make sure they completely understood the magnitude of what they had lost. And above all, I needed to protect myself legally so they couldn't harm me even after everything blew up. The next morning, I called the lawyer. I need to urgently update my will. The attorney, the same man with thick glasses who had given me the news of the inheritance, received me that same afternoon. I explained the situation without going into emotional details. Just facts. He listened with a neutral expression and then nodded. I understand perfectly, Mrs. Carter. Unfortunately, I see cases like this more often than I would like. He drafted a new will in which he specified that my son Robert was completely disinherited. Everything, absolutely everything, would go to a charity foundation that helped single mothers in vulnerable situations. Women like I had been decades ago. I signed every page with a cold satisfaction. I also need you to prepare a legal power document, revoking any authority anyone else might try to obtain over my assets or medical decisions, I told him. The lawyer prepared the corresponding papers. Everything was certified, sealed, legal, and irrevocable. Is there anything else I can do for you? The lawyer asked when we finished. Yes. I need you to recommend a good real estate agent. I'm going to sell my current house. His expression remained professional, but I saw a flicker of approval in his eyes. He gave me 3 names of trustworthy agents. That night, I arrived home later than usual. Robert and Chelsea were eating something they had ordered for delivery because, of course, neither of them cooked. They looked at me with surprise when I entered. Mom, where were you? You had us worried. The lie flowed from Robert's mouth so fluidly. Worried. They were surely worried that I had died and ruined their plans to rob me while I was still breathing. I had some things to take care of, son. Adult things. I said it with a sweet smile, but I put emphasis on the word adults as a reminder that I was the owner of this house and my own life, even though they seemed to have forgotten it. The following days were a masterpiece of strategic patience. Every morning I woke up with a renewed purpose. While they slept late, I was in contact with real estate agents, lawyers, accountants. I organized every detail of my new life as if I were assembling a complex puzzle where every piece had to fit perfectly. I visited the ranch I inherited from William, that beautiful piece of land 2 hours from the city, with a main house that needed repairs but had incredible potential. I hired a manager to start working the land. I opened new bank accounts. I met with a financial advisor who almost fell off his chair when I told him the amount I needed to invest. Mrs. Carter, with this amount, and at your age, you can live very comfortably for the rest of your life without worries. The advisor, a young man in a gray suit who treated me with a respect I hadn't received in my own house for years, told me, we can create a diversified portfolio that generates monthly passive income of at least $4,000, maybe $5,000 if we're conservative. $4,000 monthly, while my son was planning to rob me to keep my $400 pension. The irony made me smile at the most unexpected moments. Sometimes I caught myself smiling while washing the dishes or folding laundry, and Robert would ask me what was so funny. Nothing, son. I'm just happy, I would answer. And it was true. I was happy. Happy in a dark and vindictive way, but happy nonetheless. The real estate agent I hired to sell my house was an efficient woman named Patricia, in her 50s, with that unstoppable energy of someone who loves her job. She came to evaluate the property on a Tuesday afternoon, when Robert and Chelsea had supposedly gone out to look for work, although I knew they were probably at a coffee shop spending the little money they had while waiting to be able to steal mine. It's a charming property, Mrs. Carter, Patricia said, walking through the rooms with her tablet in hand, taking notes and photos. The location is excellent. The size is perfect for a young family. With some minor repairs, we could list it for $320,000. Maybe up to $350,000 if we find the right buyer. $320,000. The house I bought 20 years ago for $80,000, working like a slave, was now worth 4 times that. And my son planned to sell it from under me, keep the money, and put me in a cheap, assisted living home. The rage I felt was so intense that I had to sit down. "Are you all right?" Patricia approached with genuine concern. Yes, I'm just emotional. This house holds a lot of memories." I wasn't lying. It held memories. Some good ones. From when Robert was a child and still genuinely loved me. When we played in the yard and he hugged me before bed. And recent, horrible memories of betrayal and cruelty. I understand perfectly. Selling a house is always an emotional process. Patricia patted me on the shoulder. But I assure you, we will find the perfect family for this place. When do you want us to put it on the market? As soon as possible. Let's say in 2 weeks. I needed that time to coordinate everything else, to make sure that when the hammer fell, it fell with deadly precision. Perfect. I'll prepare all the documents. Patricia left with her tablet full of photos and measurements, leaving me alone in the house that would soon no longer be mine, but which would also soon no longer be theirs. That night, Robert finally made his move. I arrived home from running errands and found him in the living room with a folder of documents on the coffee table. He had that rehearsed expression of seriousness, like an actor about to give his grand monologue. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something important." He sat on the sofa and motioned for me to sit beside him. Chelsea appeared from the kitchen with 2 cups of tea, one for him and one for me, with that Judas smile. "Of course, son, tell me." I sat down and took the cup of tea, feigning absolute innocence. "Look, I've been thinking a lot about your situation," he began with that voice of fake concern that I now recognized perfectly. "You're getting older, and managing your finances must be increasingly complicated. Banks, paperwork, all that bureaucracy. So, I consulted with a lawyer, and he suggested that maybe it would be a good idea for you to give me a legal power of attorney to help you with those things." A legal power of attorney. I acted confused, tilting my head like an elderly woman who doesn't understand complicated terms. "Yes, Mom. It's just a document that allows me to handle bank and legal transactions for you, to make your life easier. That way, you don't have to go to the banks, signing complicated papers. I'll take care of everything." The smile he gave me was the same one he used when he was a child and wanted to convince me to buy him a toy. "Oh, how thoughtful of you, son." I took the folder and started reviewing the documents. They were exactly what I expected. A broad power of attorney that would give him total control over all my properties, bank accounts, and financial decisions. In other words, a blank check to legally rob me. It's a little technical, Mom. Don't worry about understanding everything. It basically just says that I can help you with your affairs. Robert tried to take the papers out of my hands, but I held on to them tighter. No, let me read. Your father always told me never to sign anything without reading the whole thing. I saw him tense up. The mention of his father, my late husband, always made him uncomfortable because deep down, he knew his father would have been deeply disappointed in him. I read every word carefully while Robert and Chelsea watched me with increasing impatience. The document was deceitfully worded, using complicated legal language to hide the fact that I would essentially be divesting myself of all control over my own life. This says that you could sell my properties without my consent, I said, pointing to a specific clause. No, Mom. That's only in case of emergency, if you weren't able to make decisions for yourself. The lie came out so smoothly from his mouth. He had perfected the art of deception. And this about you being able to make medical decisions for me? I pointed to another section. It's for your protection, Mom. Imagine you're in the hospital and can't communicate. Someone has to be able to decide for you. Chelsea intervened with that sweet, poisonous voice. I looked at both of them. I saw the anxiety in their eyes, the barely contained greed. They wanted me to sign right then and there, before I could think about it too much or consult with anyone else. And for a second, just 1 second, I considered signing the document just to see their faces when they discovered I had nothing left to steal because I had already moved everything. But no, I had a better plan. You know what, son? You're right. This seems very useful. I saw them relax, saw them exchange looks of victory. But let me take it to my own lawyer so he can explain it to me better, just to be sure I understand everything. The mask cracked for an instant. Your lawyer? Mom, you don't need to spend money on a lawyer. I already consulted one. I know, son. But your father always said that in legal matters, it's better to have a second opinion. Don't worry. It's not mistrust towards you. It's just caution. I smiled with all the sweetness in the world as I put the documents back in the folder. But, Mom, Robert tried to protest. It's already decided. I'll take it tomorrow to the lawyer who helped me with your Uncle William's inheritance papers. I dropped that casual information like a bomb. I had avoided mentioning the inheritance for days, waiting for the perfect moment. The change in the atmosphere was instantaneous. Robert and Chelsea froze like statues. Inheritance? What inheritance? Robert's voice sounded sharp, almost hysterical. Oh, I hadn't told you to. I acted surprised. Your Uncle William left me a few things when he died. I've been dealing with the paperwork with the lawyer these past weeks. That's why I've been out so much lately. What things did he leave you? Chelsea leaned forward, and the greed in her eyes was so obvious it almost made me laugh. Oh, well, the old ranch he had in the country. You know, that run-down property that hardly anyone ever visited. I said it with a dismissive tone, as if it was worthless. And some money in the bank? Not much. Just some savings. How much money? Robert wasn't even trying to disguise his interest anymore. He had leaned forward, his hands clasped over his knees, his eyes shining with that avarice that I could now see with crystal clarity. I'm not exactly sure. The lawyer told me an amount, but you know how I am with numbers. I touched my temple with a gesture of adorable confusion. I think he said something about 80,000, or maybe it was 18,000. Honestly, I don't remember well. I would have to check the papers. The lie came out of my mouth with a surprising ease. Decades of absolute honesty, and now I was lying as if I had been practicing all my life. I watched them process the information. $80,000 was not a fortune, but it wasn't a small amount either. Enough to pique their interest, but not so much that they would suspect I was hiding something bigger. Chelsea and Robert exchanged one of those couple's glances that communicate without words, and I could read exactly what they were thinking. We need that money. Mom, that's wonderful. Robert got up and hugged me, and the physical contact gave me shivers. His arms around me felt like a stranger's. I'm so happy for you. Uncle William was a good man. Yes, he was. Much better than his nephew, I thought. But I just smiled. And, well, with that money you could do a lot of things. Chelsea joined the conversation with that syrupy voice she used when she wanted something. You could fix the house, take that trip you've always wanted, or... She paused calculatedly. Or you could help Robert and me with the down payment on our apartment. You know we've been looking for a place of our own. There it was. It didn't take them 5 minutes to ask for money. They didn't even wait a day to pretend they were happy for me. Immediately they thought about how they could benefit. Oh, I don't know, sweetie. I still have to see exactly how much it is and what I'm going to do with it. I played the undecided, confused old woman who doesn't know how to handle money. Plus, there's the ranch. The lawyer says I could sell it, but I don't know if anyone would want to buy that old land. I could help you with that, Mom. Robert practically jumped at the offer. I could research buyers, handle the sale for you. It would be easier if you gave me that legal power of attorney I showed you. That way, I can do all the paperwork without bothering you. Of course. Now the power of attorney wasn't just to steal the little they thought I had, but also to steal the inheritance. They wanted total control of everything. The magnitude of their greed was limitless. Let me think about it, son. It's all very recent, very overwhelming. I yawned exaggeratedly. I'm tired. I'm going to bed. I got up with the folder of documents under my arm and went up the stairs to my room. From upstairs, I heard them talking in urgent whispers. I turned down the volume of the television I had left on in my room and pressed my ear to the door to hear better. This changes everything. Chelsea's voice sounded excited. If she has $80,000 plus the sale of the ranch, we're talking about much more money than we thought. I know, but we have to be careful. She can't suspect anything. Robert sounded anxious, but controlled. I'm going to research how much that ranch is really worth. If it's where I think it is, it could easily be worth $200,000 or more. And you think she'll give us the money if we ask her? Chelsea doubted. Not all of it. She's cheap. She's always been cheap. She'll say she needs to save some for emergencies, for her old age. That's why I need her to sign that power of attorney. Once I have it, I can sell everything without her realizing it until it's too late. I'll tell her the prices were lower than expected, that there were legal expenses, that there was little left after taxes. She doesn't know anything about those things. Cheap. She called me cheap. The woman who spent every last cent on him for decades, who ran out of savings multiple times to help him, who worked herself sick to give him everything. Cheap. But we have to act fast, Robert continued, before someone else gets into her head, before that lawyer suggests she do something different with the money. Tomorrow I'm going to pressure her to sign. I'm going to tell her the lawyer urgently needs the document. That if we don't do it soon, there will be legal problems with the inheritance. Perfect. I'll take her shopping tomorrow. I'll keep her distracted, tired. When she gets home, she'll be so exhausted that she'll sign whatever you put in front of her. Chelsea laughed, and that sound cut through me like a knife. This woman, whom I treated like a daughter, was deliberately planning to exhaust me, to manipulate me. You're brilliant, babe. Another kiss. More sounds of affection between two people who were conspiring against me. In 2 weeks, all of this will be ours. The house, the inheritance money, everything. And she'll be in that assisted living home without knowing what happened. I moved away from the door and sat on my bed. My hands were trembling, but not from fear or sadness. From anticipation, from power. Because they didn't know that I knew. They didn't know that every word they spoke was just digging their grave deeper. They didn't know that the money was already protected, that the house was about to be sold, that I had changed my will, that I had everything documented with lawyers. I barely slept that night, not from anxiety, but from the pure adrenaline of knowing that I was about to teach them the most important lesson of their lives. I stayed awake planning every detail of the final moment, that instant when I would reveal everything. It had to be perfect. It had to be devastating. It had to leave them speechless, without excuses, without a way out. The next morning, Chelsea appeared in my room early, with a radiant smile. Good morning, mother-in-law. How about you and I go shopping today? It's been so long since we spent quality time together, just the two of us. Oh, what a lovely gesture, sweetie. I smiled with all the innocence I could muster. I would love that. We ate breakfast, all three of us together. A meal that she prepared for the first time in months. Scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice. Everything served with smiles and polite conversation. Robert asked me how I had slept, if I felt well, if I needed anything. The performance was so transparent now that I knew their true intentions, that it was hard not to laugh in their faces. Chelsea drove me to the mall in her car. On the way, she talked incessantly about trivial things, keeping me entertained, establishing that false intimacy. We walked through stores for hours. She made me try on clothes she knew I would never buy, showed me expensive shoes, took me from one place to another until my feet genuinely started to hurt. "Tired, mother-in-law?" she asked with that fake concern when she saw me sit down on a mall bench. "A little, yes. I don't have the energy I used to." I let my voice sound weak, fragile, making her believe her plan was working. "Poor dear. Let's go home so you can rest." She took my arm with that condescending delicacy used with the elderly, and we walked slowly to the parking lot. In the car, as she drove back, Chelsea began her real work. "You know, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday about your brother's inheritance." "Yes." I acted distracted, looking out the window. "It's a big responsibility managing so much money at your age. Doesn't it scare you a little? I mean, with so many scammers out there, so many bad people taking advantage of seniors." Her voice dripped with false concern. I hadn't thought about that. I let a hint of anxiety color my voice. "Do you think someone might try to rob me?" "It's possible, mother-in-law. That's why I think it would be a good idea to let Robert help you. He's young, he understands these modern things, he knows how to protect the money, and above all, he's your son. You can trust him completely." The words came out of her mouth with such conviction that for a moment I wondered if she really believed what she was saying, if she had rationalized her betrayal so much that she genuinely thought they were doing the right thing. "I guess you're right." I sighed as if I were seriously considering it. "It's just that I'm a little afraid to sign papers I don't completely understand. That's why you have to trust your family, mother-in-law. We would never hurt you. We love you." She took my hand while driving, and the contact of her skin against mine made me nauseous. Those same hands that were holding me with false affection had been planning my banishment to a cheap assisted living home. I looked out the car window as she continued talking, trying to convince me with sweet words and well-rehearsed lies. The streets flashed by quickly, the same streets I had driven thousands of times for decades, going to and from exhausting jobs, always thinking about giving my son a better future. And now that son saw me as an obstacle, as something disposable. When we arrived home, Robert was waiting in the living room with the same documents from the day before. But this time he had brought a mobile notary, a small man with a briefcase who introduced himself as Mr. Ramirez. "Mom, I'm glad you're here. Look, Mr. Ramirez came so we can make the legal power of attorney official today. That way, you don't have to worry about anything anymore." Robert sounded excited, urgent. Mr. Ramirez was a man in his 50s, thin, with wire-rimmed glasses and a brown suit that had seen better days. He had that neutral expression of someone who has certified thousands of documents without really caring about the content of any of them. He opened his briefcase and pulled out an official seal, ink, and several extra sheets. "Good afternoon, ma'am." He extended his hand with professional courtesy. "Your son hired me to come and certify some documents. It's a quick process. It won't take more than 10 minutes. How kind of you to come all the way here." I shook his hand and sat down in my favorite rocking chair, acting like the tired old woman who had just arrived from an exhausting day of shopping. Allow me to see the documents first. Robert visibly tensed. Mom, they're the same ones I showed you yesterday. The lawyer is in a hurry. He has other clients waiting. There's no rush, Mr. Carter. The notary handed me the documents with a professional smile. The lady has every right to review what she's going to sign. Moreover, it is my obligation to ensure that she fully understands the content. I saw Robert clench his fists. His plan was getting complicated. I took the papers and began to read them slowly, very slowly, running my finger over each line as if I needed help to follow the text. The silence in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. This says that my son would have total control over all my bank accounts, I said after a moment, pointing to a specific clause. That's correct, ma'am. It's a broad power of attorney. Mr. Ramirez nodded. And he could sell my house without consulting me? Technically, yes, if the document is signed as currently drafted. The notary maintained his neutral tone, but I saw a flash of something in his eyes. Perhaps discomfort. Perhaps suspicion. I understand. I continued reading. And medical decisions? He could decide to commit me somewhere if he wanted to. Mom, please. Robert intervened with a tense voice. You're misunderstanding everything. This is just to help you, to make your life easier. I just want to understand, son. I looked at him with those innocent mother's eyes that he knew so well. It's just that your father always taught me to be careful with these issues. Chelsea shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. Mr. Ramirez looked at all of us with growing professional interest. The tension in the room was palpable. I continued reading every word, every clause, every piece of fine print. I took my time. I asked questions. I asked for clarifications. I watched as Robert grew more and more desperate, as Chelsea bit her lower lip until it almost bled, as the notary began to realize that something was not right in this situation. Finally, after almost 30 minutes of meticulous review, I closed the folder and handed it back to Robert. I'm not going to sign this today. The silence that followed was absolute. Robert froze with the folder in his hands, his face passing through a spectrum of emotions. Confusion, frustration, contained rage. What? Why not? His voice came out sharper than he intended. Because I want my own lawyer to review it first. I already told you yesterday, son. It's not mistrust, it's prudence. I kept my tone gentle, reasonable, completely calm. But Mom, the lawyer is already here. I already paid for his time. Robert was losing his composure. And I will pay him too for the trouble of coming. I took out my wallet and extracted several bills. What is your fee, sir? The notary looked at the bills, then at Robert, then at me. Something in his expression changed. It's $100, ma'am. But the young man already paid in advance. Then I'll take this as additional compensation for making him come without a result. I handed him $150. The man took them, put his things in the briefcase, and said goodbye with a professional courtesy that didn't include promises to return. When the door closed behind Mr. Ramirez, the atmosphere in the living room changed radically. Robert dropped the folder onto the coffee table with more force than necessary. Chelsea crossed her arms. Both looked at me with a hostility they no longer even tried to completely hide. I don't understand why you're being so difficult about this. Robert paced back and forth like a caged animal. I'm literally just trying to help you. And I appreciate it, son. But I need time to think it over carefully. I got up from my chair with an exaggerated groan. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm exhausted. I'm going to lie down for a while. I went up to my room, leaving them downstairs with their frustration. I lay down on the bed, but not to rest, but to think. The time had come. I could no longer prolong this charade. Every day spent in this house, feigning normalcy with these two people who planned to destroy me, sickened my soul a little more. From my room, I could hear their voices rising in argument. They didn't try to lower their volume. They probably thought I was so tired that I had fallen asleep immediately. "I told you we had to pressure her more." Chelsea's voice pierced the walls. Now she's suspecting something. I saw how she looked at us. She's not suspecting anything. She's just stubborn, like she's always been. Robert sounded frustrated, defeated. But eventually she'll sign. She has no other option. What if she never signs? What if that darn notary told her something that put her on alert? Chelsea was panicking. Then we go to Plan B. We declare her mentally incapacitated. I already explained it to you. But Robert's voice didn't sound as sure as before. I sat up in bed and took out my phone. I called Patricia, the real estate agent. "We have offers for the house. Mrs. Carter, I was just about to call you. We have 3 excellent offers. The highest is for $335,000. A young couple is willing to close the deal in 2 weeks, if accepted." Her voice sounded excited. "I accept. Prepare all the documents." My voice was firm, determined. "Perfect. Do you want us to coordinate a date for the couple to view the property?" "It's not necessary. They already saw the photos and the video you sent them, correct?" "Yes, but buyers usually want to see in person before—" "Tell them I have to sell quickly for personal reasons. If they are willing to close without any further visits, I'll drop the price by $5,000, $330,000. Deal closed in 10 days. I was willing to lose a little money in exchange for speed. Patricia paused. "Let me contact them. I'll call you back in an hour." 40 minutes later, my phone rang. They accepted. They want to close in 10 days, if possible. They have the cash ready. Perfect. Proceed with everything. I hung up and stared at the ceiling of my room. 10 days. In 10 days, this house would no longer be mine. But it would also not be theirs. It would never be theirs. I also called my lawyer, the same one who had handled William's inheritance. "I need you to prepare a formal letter for my son, informing him that he has 30 days to vacate the property once the sale is finalized." "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Carter?" His voice had a tone of paternal concern. "Completely sure. And I also need you to be present when I communicate this to them. I want everything legally documented." "Understood. I will prepare everything." The following days were an exercise in absolute control. Robert tried several more times to get me to sign the power of attorney, each time with different arguments. That the notary had found problems with the inheritance that required immediate action. That there was an investment opportunity we couldn't miss. That the bank was asking questions about William's money. All lies. And I dismissed them without effect. "I already told you I'm going to review it with my lawyer, son. Be patient." And every time I said it, I saw his frustration grow a little more. Chelsea changed tactics. She became even sweeter, more attentive, cooking my favorite meals, offering to help me with everything. "Mother-in-law, let me take you to the bank tomorrow. We can review your accounts together, organize everything. It would be fun, a girl's day out." I politely declined every offer, and I saw the resentment growing behind her smile. I packed my things in secret, just the essentials. Clothes, important documents, some photographs from when Robert was a child and still genuinely loved me. I left everything else. The furniture, the ceramic decorations they so despised, the crocheted doilies. They could do whatever they wanted with all of it. I didn't need it anymore. Day 9 arrived. Tomorrow would be the closing of the house sale. Tonight would be my last night sleeping here. And I had decided that tonight would also be the night I would tell them everything. I sat in front of my bedroom mirror and really looked at myself for the first time in years. There was Carmina, 68 years old, with wrinkles that told stories of suffering and sacrifice. Gray hair that was once raven black, hands rough and scarred from decades of hard work. But in my eyes, I saw something new. Fierceness, determination, power. I put on my dark green dress, the one I saved for special occasions. I carefully styled my hair. I applied light makeup. I wanted to look dignified for this moment. I wanted them to remember this image of me not as the victim they planned to create, but as the strong woman I always was, but whom they never knew how to appreciate. I went downstairs at 7 in the evening. Robert and Chelsea were in the living room watching television, as always. When they saw me enter dressed up, they looked at me in surprise. "Are you going out, Mom?" Robert asked. "No. We are going to have dinner, the three of us together tonight. I have something important to tell you." My voice had a quality they hadn't heard before. Authority, control. I cooked dinner myself that night. It wasn't elaborate, just pasta with tomato sauce and a salad, but I did it with the steadiest hands I had had in weeks. I set the table carefully, using the cream-colored tablecloth I reserved for special occasions. The good dishes I almost never took out. The wine glasses that were a wedding gift almost 40 years ago. Everything had to be perfect for this moment. Robert and Chelsea sat down at the table with confused expressions. It wasn't normal for me to do all this on a random weekday. They looked at me with that mixture of curiosity and suspicion, trying to figure out what was happening. "This looks very fancy, Mom." Robert tried to sound casual, but I detected the tension in his voice. "Is there a special occasion?" "Yes, there is." I served the pasta onto each plate with deliberate, calm movements. "Today is a very important day. The day several things come to an end." Chelsea and Robert exchanged glances. "What do you mean?" she asked. I sat down in my place at the head of the table, the position I had always occupied in this house. I folded my hands in my lap and looked them directly in the eyes, first one, then the other. The silence stretched for several seconds. I let the tension build, let them feel uncomfortable. "Exactly 11 days ago," I began, my voice clear and controlled. "I arrived at this house after having received the most wonderful news of my life. My brother William had left me an inheritance, not the $80,000 I mentioned to you." I paused and watched them lean forward, attentive. "But $850,000 in cash, plus a complete ranch of 200 acres. The shock on their faces was instantaneous. Their jaws literally dropped. Chelsea dropped the fork she had picked up. Robert froze mid-movement. "I came rushing home that day," I continued, without averting my gaze, excited like a child, imagining the joy on your faces when I told you. Thinking about everything we could do together with that money, about how I could finally help you in a significant way after years of struggle." My voice remained even, unemotional, just stating facts. "But when I got to the door of this house, I heard voices coming from the open window. Your voices." I watched the color drain from their faces. Robert opened his mouth to speak, but I raised a hand. "No. It's my turn to speak now. You two have had enough time." The tone of my voice was steel. "I heard you planning how to put me in an assisted living home for $750 a month. I heard you discussing how to keep my $400 pension. I heard Chelsea call me an old cockroach, say that my mothball smell made her nauseous, that she was tired of pretending she cared." Chelsea turned paper white. "Carmina." I heard my son. My voice broke slightly here, but I composed myself. "The son I carried in my womb, whom I nursed, for whom I sacrificed everything, say that it would be easier if I got sick soon, that I had already lived my life, that he wouldn't spend money on treatments for me because it wasn't worth it. Mom, that's not... Robert tried to interrupt, his face now red with shame and panic. Silence. My voice echoed in the dining room with an authority I had never used before. I heard every word of your plan to steal this house from me using a fraudulent power of attorney. I heard how you planned to sell it without my realizing it and keep the money. I heard you call me stupid, cheap, a dead weight. Every word came out of my mouth like a bullet. And I decided at that moment that the naive Carmina, the sacrificial mother who forgives everything, had died. In her place, someone new was born. Someone who was finally going to think of herself first. I got up from the chair and walked to the window, turning my back to them for a moment to regain my composure. When I turned back, my eyes were dry but bright with determination. These last few days have been very productive for me, I began, walking slowly around the table, like a lawyer presenting evidence to the jury. I hired the best financial advisor in the city. I invested the $850,000 in a way that generates approximately $4,500 monthly in passive income. I changed my will with a certified lawyer. My son Robert is completely disinherited. All my assets will go to a foundation that helps single mothers in vulnerable situations. Women like I once was. Robert stood up abruptly. You can't do that. I'm your only son. I can, and I did. It is already signed, sealed, and legally registered. My voice did not tremble. I also hired a real estate agent. This house, the house you two planned to steal from me, was sold 3 days ago. The closing is tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock for $330,000. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see their brains processing the information, calculating, panicking. 330,000, Chelsea whispered, mentally calculating everything they had just lost. That's right. And before you ask, no. You won't see a single cent of that money either. I took an envelope from my pocket and dropped it onto the table. This is a legal eviction notice. You have exactly 30 days starting tomorrow to remove all your belongings and find another place to live. But we have nowhere to go. We don't have money. Robert shouted, and the desperation in his voice was real. How interesting. I crossed my arms. Because I didn't have money either when I was widowed at 30 years old with a 4-year-old child. And somehow, I survived. I worked 3 simultaneous jobs. I slept 4 hours a night for years. I literally broke my back so you could have food, education, opportunities. My voice rose in volume. And I did it alone, without complaining, without planning to betray anyone, without thinking about putting my son in an assisted living home when it became inconvenient. Mom, please. Robert approached with his hands outstretched. And for the first time in days, I saw real tears in his eyes. I know I made a terrible mistake. I know what we said was unforgivable, but we didn't really mean to do it. We were just venting, frustrated. You know how it is when people are under financial stress. A mistake? I laughed, and the sound came out bitter, dry. A mistake is forgetting to buy milk at the grocery store. What you two did was meticulously plan how to defraud me, rob me, and abandon me. You brought a notary to this house to make me sign fraudulent documents. Chelsea took me shopping with the specific purpose of exhausting me so I would be too tired to think clearly. That is not a mistake, son. That is premeditated malice. Chelsea stood up too, with tears running down her cheeks. Please, Carmina. I know I was horrible. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But don't do this to us. We're family. Family. I repeated the word as if it were poison in my mouth. Family doesn't plan to lock up their loved ones in cheap assisted living homes to keep a $400 pension. Family doesn't call the person who gave them a roof over their heads a cockroach when they had nothing. Family doesn't calculate how long you'll take to die so they can keep your things. I moved closer to Robert until I was inches from his face. I looked directly into his eyes, those eyes that once looked with genuine love when he was a child. I gave you everything, absolutely everything. My youth, my health, my dreams, my opportunities, my money, my time, my love. And you took it as if it were your right, as if I owed you all of that, simply because you were born. My voice cracked slightly, but I continued. You never learned the value of sacrifice because you never had to sacrifice anything. I gave you everything so easily that you thought that was how the world worked. That people simply give you things without expecting even respect in return. I'm sorry. Robert was openly weeping now. I am so sorry, Mom. You're right about everything. I've been a horrible son, a horrible human being. But give me a chance to fix it. Please. There is nothing to fix. My voice was final, definitive. It's already done. Tomorrow I sign the sale papers. The day after tomorrow, I move to my brother's ranch. I've already hired workers to restore it. I've already spoken with the neighbors in the nearby town. I am going to live the rest of my life in peace, surrounded by nature, with enough money to never worry again. I'm going to have the life I deserved to have decades ago. I turned around and started climbing the stairs to my room. Their voices followed me, pleading, crying, but they no longer mattered to me. I reached my room and locked the door. The next morning, I woke up at 6 o'clock. I went downstairs with my packed suitcase. They were still asleep, exhausted from the night of crying and drama. I left the house keys on the dining room table, along with the eviction notice and a final note that simply read, "Learn to value people before you lose them." I walked out of that house for the last time, feeling the weight of decades of sacrifice finally lifting from my shoulders. The morning sun greeted me with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. I breathed deeply, filling my lungs with fresh, clean air. I drove towards my new life with a smile on my lips. A smile of freedom, of justice, of rebirth. At 68 years old, for the first time in my existence, I was going to live for myself. And it felt glorious.